In this episode of our database course, we are going to focus on the stock in SAP Extended Warehouse Management. There are three important tables managing the stock of an EWM-driven warehouse. You might wonder why we need that many tables for just managing the stock in EWM. That is because, not like the older SAP warehouse management systems do, the EWM stock is separated in physical stock and in available stock. And those different categories of stock are managed in three tables. Obviously, as we always tell you, there are more tables involved, but we always try to explain the most important ones. So let us have a look. The first table we are going to have a look at is the so-called available stock. The table for this stock is the following. This table holds entries and the respective quantities available for any kind of action in the EWM. Like for example the quantity of a product on a bin you could create warehouse tasks for. The next two tables involved for managing the stock in Extended Warehouse Management hold entries for the physical stock. At first, let us check out the Quant Attribute table. This table holds entries for basically every stock in the warehouse, whether it's available or just physical stock. So, basically the table describes the stock with all its attributes, like for example if the specific stock is assigned to an inbound delivery, or maybe to an outbound delivery order. The last table we are going to have a look at is the LIME stock quantities table. Since up to now we always had tables starting with the prefix SCWM, let us just explain what the LIME prefix stands for. LIME stands for Logistics Inventory Management Engine. Tables starting with this prefix handle all the internals of the EWM stock, like for example the quantities or physical inventory documents. The most important information for us right now is that our table holds the actual physical quantity of the stock. I know it might be pretty hard to understand this kind of concept, but when you work with the EWM, it will become more familiar to you. So, let us check out what really happens on database level in the SAP Extended Warehouse Management. First of all, let us check out the stock in the EWM Warehouse Monitor. We expand the stock and bin node and double-click on the storage bin. In this example, we want to check out the stock on the GI zone. So, we type the GI zone in the storage bin field and execute the selection. The EWM now displays the storage bin itself. On top of the list, we see multiple buttons. And we see what we already explained to you in the beginning of the episode, the separation of physical and available stock. First, let us check out the physical stock. As we see, we got one piece of the nice handbag stored in a handling unit, and that handling unit stands on the GI zone. So, to shorten all that, the physical quantity right now is one piece. Now let us check out the available stock, and as we see, we also got one piece available. So basically the stock is just laying around up till now. Next, let us have a look at the database. We go to the SE16 and type in the table name for the available quantity. As you can see, there are multiple ways to select our stock. But since we know that the stock we just showed you in the Warehouse Monitor is the only stock on the GI zone, we just go the storage bin route. But before we do that, we want to show you something to smile about. The first three fields beneath the GUIDs, the warehouse number, the storage type and the storage bin. All the other fields you can see have some sort of English naming, but those three are basically German. The first one for the warehouse number basically is the short form of the German word Lagernummer. The second one is basically the short form of the German word Lagertyp. And the third one, of course, German again, the Lagerplatz. But we will keep it at that with me trying to be funny. So, let us check out the database entry. We enter the storage bin and execute our selection. The EWM now displays the data for the available quantity on the GI zone bin. Let us double click on that entry and check out the details. The first two fields you may notice are the IDs for the parent object and the stock object. In our example we see that the handling unit field further down in the display is filled. So that means that the handling unit in this case is a stock separating attribute, which means that the parent GUID in our example is the handling unit on the bin, and the stock GUID is the actual stock inside of the handling unit. Other important fields are of course the product, and in our case the batch, that define the stock itself. Like which product and which batch we are looking at right now. And of course the quantity. In our example, as we saw in the warehouse monitor before, we got one piece of the stock on our bin. And that is a wrap on the available stock. Next, let us check out the other tables we mentioned in the introduction of this episode. We copy the GUID of the parent object, because we need this entry in order to select out the data from the other tables. We head back to the SE16 and enter the table for the Quant Attributes. Now let us just paste the GUID parent value into the corresponding input field and execute the selection. And here we go, the Quant Attributes of the stock on the GI zone. Since we do just have a plain and simple free kind of stock, all the quant splitting attributes, like the ID of the delivery and the delivery item for example, are not filled. So basically, we got a pretty easy example of such a quant attribute entry. No inspection lot document, no inbound delivery or outbound delivery order the stock is assigned to. So in our example, a pretty straightforward entry. And that's why we want to go on to the next table, the stock quantity table. So let us head back to the SE16 and type in the table name. We execute the selection via the GUID parent object like we did before. And there it is, the stock quantity entries for our stock on the GI zone. You might wonder why there are two entries in the table. That is because in order to provide you with a good example, we of course tested this scenario up front and turned it all back to the initial situation, so no wondering about that. Let us now have a look at the correct database entry, in our case the first one. As we see, the table does not have that many fields to explain, but let's check out the most important ones. Besides the GUIDs for the stock itself and of course the parent object, we have fields for the parent and stock index. The entries in this example can be translated like this. Parent ID W01 means that the parent object is a handling unit, and the stock index W02 means that the actual stock is one layer underneath. So on top level we have a handling unit, and one layer underneath we have the stock itself. So basically a handling unit with stock on a bin. And of course we got the quantity itself. In our example, as we already know, one piece. We now showed you how those entries look like when there is no movement of stock or handling units involved. But we are going to change that right now. So let us reserve some stock. In this example, we are going to do that by creating a warehouse task for our stock. So let us jump to the ad hoc product warehouse task transaction. Once there, we enter the bin, in our case of course the GI zone, and we execute our selection. The EWM now shows us all the movable stock on that bin. Of course, as we know, all the stock on our bin is movable, so basically everything of that one piece we got. Of course, we now have to tell the EWM how much of that one piece we want to move, and that's, you guessed it, one piece. Since we do not want the EWM to run a put-away strategy in this example, we have to enter the destination bin we want the warehouse task to point to. Because the destination is not important, since we want to move stock regardless of the destination, we just enter the GI zone as the destination again. So basically we want a warehouse task for one piece of our stock from the GI zone to the GI zone. And that is basically all we have to enter. So let's just execute the warehouse task creation by clicking on the Create and Save button. And here we go, we successfully created a warehouse task. You might wonder why the pop-up being displayed shows us that the available stock could not be determined. That's because after generating the warehouse task, the EWM performs a refresh of the graphical user interface. And since we know that there was just one piece laying around on the bin, and we just created an open warehouse task for that one piece, there is no available stock left to create warehouse tasks for. That's why this warning message appears. But back to business. The pop-up showed us that after creating the warehouse task, no available stock was left on the bin. We are going to verify that with the warehouse monitor. So let's just head there and check out the storage bin node like we did before. We enter the GI zone as our storage bin and execute the selection. Of course, the EWM now displays the bin itself again, but we want to see the stock. So let's check out the physical stock first. And as you might have guessed, we still got one piece of physical stock, of course. Because the physical stock didn't change. We had one piece laying around on the bin before, and until we operate the warehouse task, we still got one piece laying around on our bin. So no changes right here. But what about the available stock? Let us have a look at that. And here it is. We do not have any available stock left on our bin. That is because we had one piece laying around, and the whole quantity, that one piece, is reserved for a movement. In a parallel universe, where we would have 5 pieces on the GI zone and created the same warehouse task like we did, we would have available stock, and that quantity would of course be 4. So now that we saw it in the product warehouse task creation transaction and in the warehouse monitor, let us check out how this scenario looks on database level. So let's head back to the SE16 and check out the Quant Attributes table. We enter the GUID parent like we did before and execute it. And as we see, nothing has changed. And why should there be any changes anyway? The Quant Attributes do not change in this scenario, since we did not do anything to the stock itself to change it. An example for such a change could be that we create an inspection document for the stock. Then the attributes would of course change, but in our case the attributes stay the same. So nothing new on that side. Now let us have a look at the stock quantity. We enter the table name, paste the GUID in the GUID parent field and execute it. And as you already might have guessed, also no news on this table. The entry looks exactly like it did before. And again, why should it change anyway? We still got one piece of physical stock laying around. So, we just got one table left that actually might have changed. So let us check out that one. We enter the table name for the available quantity, paste the GUID and execute our selection. And here it is. There are no entries found in the table. All the transactions before showed us that, and the database only proves it. Up front, we had one piece of available stock. We reserved one piece of that stock by creating a warehouse task, and since 1 minus 1 equals 0, the database entry gets deleted. And that is a wrap on the stock episode of our database course. But before we finish it, let us do a short recap. We got 3 important tables in play for the stock in EWM. The available quantity, which tells us the actual quantity we can perform actions with. The stock attributes, which tell us what kind of stock it is. And the quant attributes, that hold the physical quantity of the stock. And reserving stock by creating an open warehouse task does not change the stock itself, but it adjusts the available quantity by updating or deleting the entry in the available quantity table.